We're live on YouTube now.
Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting to order and declare that we have a quorum and look for the adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a lot of so moves and seconds,
Fourth.
and I will call the vote. Dr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Garden,
Yes.
Dr. Alvin,
Yes.
Ms. Greco,
Yes.
Ms. Glover Jones,
She's on.
Yes.
and I will vote yes. Moving on to 1.04, we are talking about the phase 2 return to learning plan at the elementary level. Before I turn this over to Dr. Kilbride, I have something that I'd like to read first as a statement from the Board of Education. We have received Before I turn this over to Dr. Kilbride, I have something that I'd like to read first. I'm getting
Yes, too.
feedback.
I fixed that on the YouTube end. It's good to go now.
Okay, thank you. We have received dozens of messages from Ritenour staff members about their concerns as we consider transitioning from phase 3 of virtual learning to phase 2 of hybrid in-person learning. And I should also say we had messages from staff members as well as parents too. Please know that we have heard all of your concern and have read all of the messages. Although we won't be reading every letter tonight during our meeting, please know that we are listening and we will continue to listen. We hear you and we thank you for reaching out to us. This is a rapid changing and dynamic situation, and we received significant feedback from families over the past few weeks that our earliest learners and elementary school students are having the greatest difficulty with full virtual learning. Our data also indicates that the positivity and transmission rate is lowest in children at the elementary and preschool levels. We have placed a priority on in-person learning. In-person learning is so important for all of our students. And as a board, we are working to find a way to bring our children back into schools as quickly and safely as possible. And safely is the key there. This can be accomplished with significant lower class sizes through our phase 2 model, where students will attend school in person 2 days per week. On days where students are not in school, there will still be an opportunity for contacting virtually with teachers and students. We truly appreciate all the extraordinary efforts of our Ritenour teachers around virtual instruction. This will remain extremely important in phase 2 as every Friday will remain fully virtual. And trust me, we know the long hours and the extreme hard work that you guys have been putting in to make the virtual learning successful. To keep our staff and community informed about any cases in our school community, we are committed to having a dashboard on our district website that illustrates data related to quarantines and positive cases in Ritenour. Most districts are organizing this data as students are in person and are planning for in person. We commit to including this information before students would return to phase 2. In order to keep our school clean, we will also be onboarding new Ritenour custodians in each building to assist with daily disinfection and cleaning tasks that are required during this pandemic. We know this is a scary, difficult, and emotional time for all of us, and we thank you for your patience and grace as we work to navigate this situation and make the best decisions for our children and our staff and our community. So I just wanted to state that because we're not going to read all of the emails that had come through, but I just wanted you to know that we have heard you. We have read all of them. I believe everybody, even if they got sent to one person, we shared them across everybody. So everybody received them, and we thank you for their feedback. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kilbride to talk about the recommendation.
Thank you, Ms. Slonis. I'd like to echo your sentiment and thank everyone for their engagement on this critical topic. It's very serious, it's very emotional, and it's very important as we think about the learning of our students, specifically our earliest learners, and we also think about the health of our staff. I'd like to recognize the teams at the building and district level that have been working hard to problem solve this changing dynamic. We have a return to learning plan that was shared on the 20th of July that outlines the different components of the various phases of our return to learning plan. And we have to be able to be flexible and adaptive and take advantage of opportunities when we believe it appropriate to move towards in-person learning for students, with the goal to get to phase one, full in-person learning for all students 5 days a week, while also maintaining an option for virtual, for the full virtual option. We realize that a move to phase one at all levels is not appropriate at this point. But thank you to the teams at the district and building level that are modifying and making changes to the plan as we receive new guidance from St. Louis County, as we receive new guidance from Misha, as well as we receive new information and research from groups such as the CDC. I just want to remind everybody that these decisions are not taken lightly, and regardless of the decision that's made tonight, we have to continue to keep students at the center of all decisions, and I'm so thankful that our Ritenour teachers are doing just that. So thank you for that. Would also like to thank Ritenour teachers for their great work to this point in the year. Like to recognize our Ritenour administrators for their great leadership in leading during this time of significant change. Couldn't be more proud to be in this work with you. So your work to establish effective routines is exactly what the kids deserve, so thank you. You've overcome roadblocks and unknowns to keep kids at the center, and it's much appreciated. We monitor data on a daily and a weekly basis. So Doug, if we can go to the next slide, would like to share with you some of the most current data. This is St. Louis County data that's published on a weekly basis. This is the data that was received from last Friday. Board members, this is the presentation, very similar presentation that was delivered to the Phase 2 committee yesterday. So positivity rate in St. Louis County into business last Friday, 5.3%. In St. Louis County, there's a 3-color scale, red, yellow, green. The green kicks in at 5%, and it cuts off right at 5%. That positivity on a 7-day average at the county level has oscillated around that 5% mark, from 4% up to 6%. So want to be clear as we're having these conversations, we're looking at data, but the other side, being totally transparent, is there are absolutely no guarantees. We are educating children in a pandemic. Our staff are educating children in a pandemic, and this is it's a very challenging time. So board members, we look at positivity rate, not just for St. Louis County, but we look at positivity rate for all of the counties that are surrounding St. Louis County, because we have staff members that travel in from a number of surrounding counties to serve kids. We also look at the transmission rate, and board members, that's the second column from the right. It's reported as an R naught value. A 1.0 means that the transmission rate is not increasing nor decreasing. Any R naught value that's north of 1.0 indicates an increase in the spread. Any R naught value that is below 1.0 indicates that there's a decrease in the spread of the virus. So one of the things that has caused us to be here tonight is we're continuing to see that while positivity rates are what they are, there's a significant split between the positivity rates for our students in the 0 to 9 age group and the students that are in the 15 to 19 age group. Students in the 10 to 14 age group are slightly higher, the positivity rates, than the 0 to 9. But the data and the split indicated that we may consider a move to phase 2 for our students at the elementary level. Next slide, Doug. Here's a breakdown of the transmission rates going back to the beginning of June. So again, a 1.0 indicates no increase nor decrease. And board members, you can see the very end of July, beginning of August, you can see that as the numbers got as high as 1.6, that indicates significant spread. You can see that the numbers have come back, the transmission rate, pretty significantly from where they were during the week of the 12th of August. But you can see that it's been pretty consistent up near the end of last week at that 1.01, 1.02 rate, which does indicate just a slight increase in the spread. But that data does not increase, does not indicate an overall decrease.
So Chris,
Next slide, please.
Chris, I have a question. So on this, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. On this chart right here, so it says St. Louis. That means St. Louis and St. Louis County and St. Charles County. What does exactly that mean?
So this is the St. Louis region, and the way that this is broken out is this is broken out by RPDCs. So this is the St. Louis region, St. Louis City, St. Louis County, the St. Louis region. So it includes portions. It includes St. Charles County, includes Jefferson County as well. Those areas where there's a Ed Plus school district.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me double check with that also, because it's including St. Charles County. So that's also including any numbers that there might be as they've gone into in school at over in St. Charles.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Got it.
Correct. So board members, the reason that that we're holding this meeting is we're seeing differences in data at different age groups. So as you can see in the report, in the first 2 weeks of September, the diagnoses by age groups for that 0 to 9 age group it remains consistently lower, the 10 to 19 age group. There's been significant focus that's been placed on high school, specifically on that 15 to 19 age group. There's also been specific focus placed on colleges, because in that 10 to 19 age group, that includes students at the upper elementary, middle school, high school level, as well as the beginning of college level. So the more focus that's placed on high school and college getting the spread under control, that's contributing to that significant decline in the rate of new cases in those age groups. In this pandemic, there has to be a little bit of pain and a little bit of and following social distancing guidelines to effectively move the data in the right direction. Next slide. So the positivity rates, the prior slide had to do with the rate of new cases. Positivity rates by age group, as you can see, around that 5%, the 0 to 9 age group remains pretty consistent. With the renewed focus on social distancing at the high school and the college level, the data indicates a significant decline in that 10 to 19 age group, with specific focus at 15 to 19. So it's good to see that data is moving in the right direction, but our goal is to see sustained data that indicates consistency across the age group. Next slide. So looking countywide at the numbers of cases by age group, the 4-year-old and younger, for our purposes, that's the school for early childhood. The 5 to 9 age group, that's our elementary students, generally up through 3rd grade. The 10 to 14 age group, that is our upper elementary and middle schools. And then you can see the cases by age group. The 15 to 19 age group, for our purposes, that's high school, but then that does also include some college as well. So some consistency over the first couple of weeks of September in that the groups that we're talking about, the early childhood group is 4 and younger, our elementary group, which is 5 to 9, and then also considering 4th and 5th grade, which would generally fall in that 10 to 14 group. You can see there is some variance and a little bit of oscillation in the data, but it's staying pretty consistent. And you can see that there continues to be a significant split between that and the 15 to 19 age group. Next slide. So board members, I apologize there. There's, I guess, a bit of an issue in the translation with the graphic that's there. Doug, can you see, can you pull that up and see if that that gets fixed?
Yep, I will grab another file and I'll fix it right now. There'll be just a moment.
Okay. So board members, while Doug is doing that, another factor that we look at is race. All along during the pandemic, we've read the research and looked at the data that indicates African American and Latino families are being impacted at a higher rate by the pandemic as opposed to white communities. We do take a look at that data on a daily and a weekly basis, and we've pulled a graphic from St. Louis County that illustrates impact on various races. One of the what the data will show is you'll see that there is a split and a bit of a disparity. That disparity is declining. But there is still a disparity around positivity rates and rates of new cases for white residents versus African American and Latino residents. So what this slide illustrates, you can see Black or African American is remaining, the number of cases amongst 100,000 is remaining pretty consistent over the first 2 weeks of September. You can see at that for these 2 weeks, as compared to the white subgroup, the data actually shows a bit of a reverse gap for these 2 weeks. And then the way the St. Louis County tracks this data as of 9/14, as you can see, the rates of newly diagnosed cases are highest among residents identifying as some other race, followed by white, followed by then Black or African American, and then multiracial residents. And so this is data that is self-identified. So people are self-identifying, and there's some choice based on this, which could impact the way this data is reporting. But the way that we've seen the data look over the course of the summer and back since the pandemic started to be tracked, we are seeing the data come more in line, thankfully, where there is much less of a split between African American and Latino communities and white communities.
Chris,
Next slide.
Chris, what's that teal
Mhm.
line? What's the teal line? I can't tell what it says. I think it says 2 or more.
Yeah, two or more races. 2 or more races. So that would bring in people that would identify as biracial.
Okay, just want to make sure I understand. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Next slide. A new look that we started looking at over the course of the last several weeks is looking at the number of cases by zip code. Here in the Ritenour School District, we're the 63114 zip code. We're also 63074, and we're also 63134. In this graphic pulled from St. Louis County, you can see that the highest rates of positivity are in the southern spur of the county, as well as in the western edge of St. Louis County. So the data is reported on a weekly basis, and as you can see, the 63114, which is mainly Overland, St. John, Breckenridge Hills, you can see that that zip code falls in the lowest range, the 0 to 115 cases per 100,000. For this specific look, for this grab of data, the 63074 and the 63134 zip codes, that data was not uploaded for some reason as it relates to this. A look further back to the prior weeks indicates that the 63074 zip code has consistently been in that second range, that light teal color, the 115 to 212 rate of cases per 100,000. The 63134 zip code, which is Woodson Terrace and Edmondson, that is the one of our zip codes that had made its way up into the darker blue, the 262 being the minimum. There was a higher rate of new cases in 63134, but that was not mirrored in our other two zip codes. Next slide. So, board members, we have a phase 2 committee, and there's been 2 meetings of the phase 2 committee, where the first meeting on September 14th, there were hopes and fears that were captured from the group, and just wanted to take a minute to call out those hopes and fears that the group mentioned on the first meeting. And then our second meeting was this past Monday, and the group had the opportunity to add to the list of hopes and fears. And this past Monday, we did not have additional hopes or fears added to the list. So I won't read all of them to you, but I will call out some hopes. And I'll first say that the phase 2 committee meeting is, the phase 2 committee is made up of teachers and support staff and administrators, also made up of parents and community members. There are 27 members of the phase 2 committee. And I think they do a great job of bringing their voice to the issue and asking a lot of great questions. Want to call out a couple of hopes. One of the hopes that came from the group is that elementary should be the first to move towards full day instruction, and elementary and middle school, as we consider moves to phase 2, should be the first to return to school. Preschool should also be the first to return to school. Also, students struggling with virtual learning will have more practice learning asynchronously. And board members, if you remember that term asynchronous, that's a term that's connected to virtual learning. Synchronous virtual learning is live or directed by the adult. Asynchronous learning is not live, it's not real time. It's generally more for project-based work or following through with work and assignments that are delivered in a synchronous fashion. Board members, right now in phase 3, there is some asynchronous instruction that's built in, but if you remember the schedules that we're operating now, they're heavy on synchronous, live, real-time virtual instruction. A hope from the group is that we would move quickly into phase 2 learning, maybe in a few weeks. That we would make decisions quickly because virtual is not working, and that we would use science to guide our decisions. So some of the hopes of the group. To call out some of the fears of the group, there's a fear that the social emotional health of students is being impacted because of the restrictions that would be in place when we return to phase 2. Board members, in-person instruction does have to come with a lot of social distancing practices that are in place. Large number of those social distancing practices are in the return to learning plan. But as new information comes about, we're also making modifications to that plan. As we know better, we're attempting to do better. So board members, that is creating some unease among staff members because as we receive new information, we realize we have to be responsive and we can't just stay locked into what we believe to be the right answers back on July 20th. Just want to make you aware that that is creating some unease among some staff members. There is a fear around the concern of staffing shortages and the need to use subs. So there is a possibility that when we return to phase 2 in person, that while we have a substitute pool of 75, while we also have a plan for current staff, a prioritized list of staff, and them being required to step into sub, there is a concern that we may not always have enough subs to cover the vacancies, especially if staff members end up deciding to take a leave. There was also a concern connected to that if staff members have to step into sub and cover a class, that could impact their content area or their special area. The fear that teachers are constantly redirecting students because of social distancing. The social distancing structures that we have in place have to be followed. And that, much like everything in education, you have to get students into a routine and you have to establish non-negotiables. The concern that staff may pass away or the pandemic may affect staff members emotionally. The concern that when flu season hits, symptoms and diagnoses will be confusing. The specific concern that was mentioned was, do COVID symptoms and flu symptoms, do they present as quite similar? The answer is yes. The response is, as a district, if someone is symptomatic, they would not be in person in school. It's not a situation where we would attempt to determine if it is a symptom related to COVID or if it's a symptom related to the flu. Rather, it would be a situation where if a person is symptomatic, they would not be there. Transmission, the fear of the transmission from younger children to older children, and then the concern that some adults are not wearing personal protective equipment appropriately and are not being truthful outside of work. So while I didn't want to read everything to you, just wanted to call out some of, I guess, would call the highlights on the hopes and fears side from the phase 2 committee. So board members, our return to learning plan is 3 phases, and we have to be prepared to navigate back and forth among these 3 phases. Right now, we're fully virtual. Our phase number 2 is the choice of hybrid in person, which is a Monday, Wednesday, or a Tuesday, Thursday cohort. And if you remember, we made the decision to go K-12 so that we would have a consistent hybrid model. Friday is a full virtual day for all students. And then students on the days that they're not in person would be engaged in independent online learning in an asynchronous fashion. What that would mean would be the teachers would be focused on teaching the students that are in person. And then the students that are working independently virtually on those days they're not there, there would be an opportunity to connect with a teacher during that time, but the teacher would be on those days focused on the students that are learning in person. As a part of our plan, there is not a plan for teachers to teach the students in person at the same time as they have students live streaming or Zooming in with them. With the plan as it was created, there were a lot of concerns around that model. We've received feedback from other districts that are attempting this model, that's a concern. And then even in the high school approach, the high school made the decision, instead of teaching students virtually while other students are Zooming in, they've designed the schedule so that there would be in-person teachers and then there would be virtual teachers to avoid that situation where teachers are having to do both. Phase number 1 of the return to learning plan, board members, is when we're able to get back to full-time in person for all students. We would continue to offer a full virtual option that would be in the form of the Ritenour Virtual Academy at kindergarten through 8th grade. We hope to have the Ritenour Virtual Academy to be an ongoing competitor to the online charter schools and MOCAP options that all Ritenour families would have options to, and that all families across the state of Missouri can access. Next slide. This is the other option, regardless of where we are. In phase number 2, families will have the option of full virtual. When we would get to that point of phase 2, for those families that are just not comfortable having in-person instruction, the Ritenour Virtual Academy is staffed based on current enrollments. If the board would approve a move to phase 2, we would reopen the window for the Ritenour Virtual Academy to allow new families to join the Ritenour Virtual Academy to be fully virtual. The communication of the move to phase 2, this application window for Ritenour Virtual Academy, it would be opened up at the same time that we announced that we're moving to phase 2. The application window would be open for 3 days. And then at that point, we would use that information to create the rosters for in-person instruction. Buildings have worked to identify additional teachers who, based on parent request and based on family choice, they've identified additional teachers who would need to be prepared to teach in a fully virtual environment, even though we're moving back to in-person. But the flexibility and just the dynamic nature of this situation, board members, is we won't know the exact numbers until the window closes for the second time on the Ritenour Virtual Academy.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
I have a question about that. So we're going to allow families to join virtual if they didn't already, but are we going to allow people who already signed a contract for virtual to go the opposite direction?
No, Ruth, our position is that if students and families have registered for the Virtual Academy, they've signed the contract for the Ritenour Virtual Academy, and that is a year-long commitment to the Ritenour Virtual Academy. It is at minimum a 1-semester commitment. So if a family would decide they don't want full virtual for their child when we get to phase 2, they've already made a commitment for the first semester. Their first opportunity to step out of Ritenour Virtual and back to in-person instruction would be at semester.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So board members, here is what a calendar for the move to phase 2 would look like. We'd be focused on the elementary level, but we would be looking at a staggered return. So the return to the early childhood center, that would be a return to phase 1, where we'd be moving back to in-person instruction 5 days a week with a reduced class size. That would be a class size of 10 with 1 adult. Currently, the class size is 18, and that's with 2 adults. But instead, we'd start with a staggered reduced class size of 10 students. As the data indicates that we could move, the next move would be to a class size of 14, and then the final move would be back to a regular class size, which is 18. So that would be starting on October 7th. And at that same time, we would be announcing the return of our kindergarten students. The feedback was that we would want to transition kindergarten students back to school first. Many of these students have not had school experience, and so the idea of transitioning them first is part of the rationale. The other feedback that we received, there is some question around that, and that feedback was just received today. Actually, there are some teachers that are questioning the benefit of the benefit of making that 1-day transition. People agree that there need to be transition, but some teachers were questioning the value of 1 day of that transition. That Friday day, that currently is a no school attendance day, and it's set up for goals conferences. And so in that, we've received feedback today, concern about transitioning at the same time that conferences would be scheduled. So as teachers would be transitioning kindergarten students back, they would also be having goal setting conferences on that day of the 9th. So what we'd be seeking to do would be to postpone the goal setting conferences based on feedback from teachers to a point when students are appropriately transitioned into phase 2. That's an example of the dynamic nature and trying to be responsive to feedback. During the week of the 12th of October, we would begin transitioning our students back at grades 1 through 3. So we would have our cohort A set up on Monday and Wednesday. We would have our cohort B set up on Tuesday and Thursday. And then on Friday, that's a full virtual day for everybody, and that would be K to 3 at that point. And then during the week of the 19th of October, we would transition our students in 4th and 5th grades back so that by the end of business on October 23rd, we would have all students that chose in-person hybrid option. We would have all students back, school for early childhood through 5th grade by the end of business on October 23rd. Board members, we are not making a recommendation at this point to move to phase 2 at the middle school or the high school level. While that data shows that it's moving in the right direction, it has not been consistent and sustained as it has been at the 0 to 4 and 5 to 9 age groups. So we would continue to monitor secondary, and we would be looking in the future to come back to you with a recommendation about when a move to phase 2 would occur. I also want to point out, board members, that I've gotten some feedback from the beginning of the move to transition amongst the plans. I have shared that we would work to give 3 weeks advance notice to staff and as well as to families. 3 weeks advance notice for planning and for scheduling so that there could be enough advance notice before we would move to a new phase. If the board would approve the move to phase 2 tonight, we are not at 3 weeks before our early childhood students and our kindergarten students would start. We're near it, but we're not at 3 weeks, and that was a statement that I have made to you, and it's a statement that I've made to staff and to the community that we would work to have 3 weeks advance notice. As we get to the 1st to 3rd grades, and as we get to the 4th and 5th grades, there would be 3 weeks advance notice for that for that 1st to 3rd, and there would be 4 weeks advance notice for that 4th and 5th. But trying to be true to my word, it's not 3 weeks at SEC and kindergarten. And the urgency around that is based on the feedback that we're receiving from families. It's based on the feedback we're receiving from the community, that for a lot of our earliest learners, this virtual option is just not the option for them. And we want to provide choice to families so that for those families that virtual is working for them, they've got the option to continue in the Ritenour Virtual Academy. But for those families that want the choice to come back in person, we're trying to give that choice to the family. But we didn't meet the 3-week criteria for those SEC and kindergarten teachers and families. Next slide. And so the recommendation language, board members, for your consideration would be to initiate phase 2 of the return to learning plan at the elementary level, starting with kindergarten on October 7th, starting with grades 1 through 3 on October 12th, and grades 4th and 5th on October 19th. We'd be initiating phase 1 of the return to learning plan at the school for early childhood starting on October 7th. And if you remember, board members, phase number 1 is in-person instruction 5 days a week. At the early childhood center, it would be with a reduced class size. And board members, I can answer your questions you may have.
Dr. Kilbride, I do have a quick question. Does this ensure that children that have IEPs or needs with special school district, that they would be a priority as well?
Yeah, students with IEPs would be able to transition back in person. The feedback that we receive is that students that receive IEP services, the greatest impact is through in-person, those services being provided in person. So the students with IEPs as the grades would transition at their grade level, so kindergarten students, first through third grade students, and fourth and fifth grade students, as their grade span transitions back, they would be able to transition back. And you know, certainly the priority is to make sure that those services are delivered in person, which is the preference that we're hearing from families.
Chris, I got a lot of feedback about specials, how they do the, like the art, the music, PE, all that. Worried about they see all the kids. What's the plan for setting that up so that's more safe?
Yeah, thank you, Ruth. So received a lot of that feedback. Our specialist teachers do see every child in the school. And so based on the numbers that we have right now, elementaries, our numbers of in-person enrollment in a day in an elementary range from about 160 to up around 190 or 200 students that would be in a building at one time on a given day. The idea that specialists would serve all of those students, the argument then is that they're being placed at a higher risk versus a classroom teacher who may have a class of 22 students, but based on the hybrid model, they would be seeing no more than 11 students at a time. Schedules being developed that would allow for specialist teachers to serve students at one grade level for an extended period of time instead of serving a variety of all students from all different grade levels. We would keep consistent the students that the specialist teachers would be working with. And so what the model that was shared with principals this afternoon looks like is instead of students rotating through all of their specials, they would have one special class for an extended period of time. So instead of art, music, library, and PE all in 1 week, students would have art for a period of 19 days. Students would have music for a period of 19 days. Students would have PE for a period of 3 weeks. And then they would transition to their next special instead of rotating among all four during the week. That would reduce the number of the amount of contact with different students for each special teacher.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I was of the understanding that the most significant item that we were going to discuss tonight was sending back the preschool or early childhood people, students through third grade, and that 4th through 12th was going to stay on the virtual at least till the end of the quarter. Was there not any discussion on that?
Yeah. You know, it's Penny. It goes back on based on the age range. This, the positivity rate by age range is where that movement is coming from. You know, as a district, we've been cautious not to lock into a specific time frame. There are some districts that have locked in to say, we wouldn't make the move until the end of the quarter. There are other districts that are saying, we wouldn't make the move perhaps until the end of this semester. Like from the beginning of this plan, we've always said that we would monitor data on an ongoing basis and we wouldn't lock into a specific arbitrary date. But as data indicates that we could make a move to in-person instruction in some format, that we would try to take advantage of that. And then going back to July 20th, part of the rationale for starting off fully virtual, my belief and our belief, I believed, was if we can start off fully virtual, that might speed our ability to get back into some form of in-person instruction as quickly as possible. But no, I've not been a part of conversations, Penny, about 4 to 12 until the quarter, and I apologize if there's any miscommunication about that.
Because I did. I kind of tallied up the emails that I've received just in the last 3 days, and I've had 31 emails, and of those, were 29 teachers and 3 actually, I have the wrong total. There were 29 teachers and 3 parents who wanted to stay virtual, and only 2 were from parents who wanted to have their children return to school, and those were parents of really young children, kindergarten, first grade. Yeah, I think that's what they were, kindergarten and first.
Yeah, thank you.
We're gonna have a, if we go with phase 2 on our website, we will be posting weekly what the statistics are for each it'll be broken down by each school. How many, if we have anyone that tested positive, anyone that, the whole gamut with, where we are at each school regarding COVID. Is that correct, Chris?
Yeah, we're taking the lead from districts that already have in-person instruction, and where like generally where you see those COVID dashboards are a lot of districts that already have students in person, and so the number of students or staff members that would be quarantined, the number of positive cases, we would commit to having that dashboard on our website before in-person instruction would begin. We would commit to that. More and more St. Louis County districts are starting to add those dashboards to their website. I think St. Louis County has been a little bit behind, and we're included in that because we've been almost fully virtual. Whereas St. Charles County, where you see a lot of districts that have those dashboards already up on their website, they've had kids in person since the beginning. So we're a little bit behind on that, but we would absolutely have that on our website before any student would come to in person, so that families can make an informed decision when they see the data, and that we would keep staff aware of what the data was by building.
And Chris, we would as well have our plan put out there with the edited details, because I think there's some updates that need to be made to our original July 20th plan with what processes are going to be put into place, what the day looks like, what everything looks like, what our expectations are, what our expectations are for our students as well as our staff in the buildings, correct?
Yeah, so Ms. Lonis, there have been some changes. One example of a change is in the return to learning plan that was posted on July 20th. The guidance and the thinking in the region at that time is that it would be masks for students at age 9 and older, so which essentially would be 3rd grade and older, but students younger than that in grades below that would not be required to wear masks. The guidance has changed. And so students in grades K through 5 would be required to wear masks at all times, and it's a non-negotiable. Buildings are working through details to organize what would be called mask breaks that would be held outside, because students wearing a mask for 7.5 hours, that's a long stretch. There would be supervised mask breaks that would be a short period of time outside, so that students would be able to take a brief mask break. But when they're in buildings, students and staff would be required to wear masks at all times, all students, all staff. And board members, we have received feedback from teachers and staff that we, do have an opportunity to not only remind people of the expectation, but also to hold people accountable for properly wearing PPE. Received a couple of reports that there have been situations where a staff member might be without a mask, but then would put on the mask when they saw another staff member, or a couple of situations where staff members would be pulling their mask down below their mouth onto their chin. And so we have an opportunity to also empower staff to have conversations with other staff members when they see that, because we have to be all in together around social distancing to make this work and have it be as safe as possible. But yes, the updates to the plan would be in the weekly update that goes to staff on Fridays. And we've got some updates this week and some clarifications that we would be pushing out. And that's something that is just, regardless of when we go back to phase 2, regardless of when we go back to phase 1, we want to continue to use that weekly communication structure to push those updates out. And we also want to make sure that the staff is logging in and checking that out every Friday.
Another concern that was brought to my attention was if the kids are going to be outside for a recess, how's that going to be handled to keep things safe?
Yeah, so that's conversations that's going on with principals. In the plan, there would be an identified area of the playground that each class would have. So in most cases, that would mean that the playground would be divided into quadrants, and the students in one specific class would be assigned one area of the playground, and that's where they would be to remain. It's going to take supervision and management. So the students that are in that class, they would be around each other throughout the day. What we're trying to do with the playgrounds is to minimize the interaction of students between the different classes. That's the appropriate social distancing out on the playground, is to keep students from different classes apart.
Okay. And what about cleaning? I heard that one complaint about all we have is a cloth mask and a spray bottle, but we have system, right?
So staff members have received disinfectant and received masks from the district as needed. We are also onboarding. Our bus drivers have been doing a great job as members of the disinfection team. They've been working every day while we've been in phase 3. As we transition to phase 2, bus drivers would return to transporting kids every day. So we have a plan to onboard an additional custodian during the day by building, but also additional Ritenour staff members in the evening for disinfection in the evening as well. These additional social distancing practices, they're going to put a strain on buildings, and the regular daytime custodian is involved in that. So we would be onboarding additional Ritenour staff in all buildings during the day to assist with those cleaning tasks that the custodian just wouldn't be able to do.
And then what about that Friday when it's total virtual?
So on that Friday, that full virtual day, I'm sorry, Ruth, you cut out. I didn't hear the end of what you said.
No, I just said, what about the Friday that in phase 2, the Friday is total virtual. So will they be in there? Nobody will be in the building. Is that correct? Or the teacher could still come in? I'm asking.
Yeah. So Friday would be a full virtual day. One of the decisions that we made was that teachers could choose to work from home if they wish. So on that Friday, we would have teachers would have the choice of teaching virtually from their instructional space in the classroom, or they could also teach from home for those teachers that have been doing it to this point. On those Fridays, with no students in the building, that would also be an opportunity for significant cleaning on those days as well. We've got to focus on surface disinfection, but the data and the research that continues to come out of the CDC and others indicates that aerosols are the way that when the virus does spread, the most likely way the virus spreads. So we do have to continue to disinfect surfaces, but the research shows it's much more likely to spread through the air as opposed to on surfaces.
Right.
So if the teachers are allowed to come in the building on that Friday, wouldn't that impact how well the custodial staff would be able to disinfect those classrooms that the teachers are virtually teaching in?
It would certainly be a situation where they would have to work together. If it were a situation where we required everybody to be outside of the building, that would probably make it more efficient for custodians and those that are disinfecting the building. But one of the things that we do know is when students get back to in-person, the needs are going to increase and the need for contact is going to increase. So having office professionals available to address concerns from students and families on that day. I don't know when we have students in person to have the expectation that Fridays nobody would be in the building. I think it'd create a hardship for families for contact.
Dr. Kilbride, can I also add that we would still have our 2-day custodians, which would allow them to do more maybe than they do when everyone is in the building. But the main part of the cleaning is still done after teachers leave for the evening. So even on Fridays.
Thank you.
Chris?
Yes.
I have another question. I know in one or two of the emails I received, there was something about the gymnasiums being full of furniture or something. I'm not really sure what all that is alluding to. Can you
Sure.
address that?
Sure. So it's difficult or impossible to disinfect soft surfaces. So couches, rugs, those soft surfaces, you can't disinfect them the way that you can hard surfaces. So as a part of the plan, all of the soft seating, all of the rugs have been removed from classrooms, and they were moved first to like storage areas in schools, and that's generally the gym. And so, as a part of the plan, we've rented storage containers from PackVan, and storage containers are on site at our buildings. And we've started to move some of that, those rugs and that soft seating out of the gymnasiums into the outdoor storage containers, because board members, if you remember, we're going to have more storage opportunities at the Husky Support Center. We're going to have a recommendation coming to you soon on the phase 2 package, but we're just not there yet. So some of those items have been moved out of the gyms into the storage containers, but in many cases, there's still a lot of items that remain in those gymnasiums. And so in many schools, they would be down one gymnasium that's serving as a storage area for all that stuff. Teachers have already taken home a lot of the equipment that they can take home. The rest of it would just remain stored until we would move back to phase 1 of the plan, when we could return that soft seating and those rugs. The other portion of that gym would be used for when we would not have a substitute. It's possible that we may not have substitute coverage from time to time. And as a part of the plan, buildings have to be prepared to use the other portion of that gym to accommodate students that might not have a sub on that day, so that they can be supervised.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Dr. Kilbride, rounding back to our website, I just wanted to make sure that when we're doing our updates, that we're also providing it in different languages so that we're not missing all of our populations within our district whenever something comes up.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question, Stacy, and we've realized some opportunities. So the virtual learning contract, that if the board would approve this move, that would go out, it's been translated into many languages to be responsive to our families. We've received feedback that around Tyler, our Tyler SIS system, while it's possible to be translated into Spanish and French and one other language, there are other languages that people need to get their information in. So we still have an opportunity around that Tyler translation that we're looking into.
Dr. Kilbride, sorry, I keep turning off my video. I'm having some internet issues over here. But to piggyback off of Stacy's question, in the same aspect, and when we share our parent and family expectations, just making sure that there's a level of understanding for our English as second language families, because we saw some opportunity with that from the virtual platform when we sent that out. So just making sure that there's a understanding of that with the expectations. The other question that I had, I know one of the themes that I was seeing in the emails received from staff was surrounding the asynchronous learning. So what opportunities or ideals have been shared or thought about as it pertains to trying to provide support in some type of ways? I know I heard you talk earlier about it's not an option to be able to do in-person and support families during asynchronous. Do we have any ideas and ways to support in those situations?
Yeah, so there'd be an opportunity for communication, whether it be emails or phone calls. One of the benefits of the phase 2 plan is that teachers generally would be working with class sizes from 8 to 10 perhaps as high as 14. But generally, our numbers are very favorable at this point. One of the things that, again, is dynamic and is a bit of a moving target is we've had a number of families that have made the decision to homeschool during this phase 3 full virtual option, that they've indicated that they would plan to come back to re-enroll when we move to phase 2. So that would have an impact on our class sizes. So the approach around asynchronous learning is that we're trying to put as much of a premium as possible on the interaction between the teacher and the student during the in-person portion. So the premium is on direct teaching, teacher and student when the student is in person in small groups of 8 to 10 to 12, up to 14 potentially. And then during that asynchronous time, that would be the time where the student would be working on a lot of the assignments, would be following through on the projects. There would still be an opportunity for communication, but it would not be in the same format as it is right now, which is generally synchronous, where the teacher and the student are interacting live. There is some asynchronous instruction that's taken place right now, but it's generally after the teacher has delivered the direct instruction synchronously. It's kind of like we would be taking what happens in one day and spreading it out over 2, where in person would be the direct instruction, asynchronous learning would be where the student would be working on the work that's assigned during the direct instruction. While it's happening, there would still be the opportunity for emails and perhaps communication with staff. But to the point and to some of the questions that have come in, it wouldn't be live as it is right now, but the exchange is that the student is getting an in-person teacher, which they're not getting now.
Along that same line, Chris, a lot of what I heard, like what Lisa was talking about, is that they come to school one day and then the next day there's no one holding them accountable, like what happened, in the spring where kids could or could not pay attention, do their work, whatever. But my gut feeling is that if we have parents that are at home with their kids now doing the virtual, and now they're going to be freed up 2 days a week, it seemed like they would be there to help them on the day that they're virtual. That's just my gut feeling. I don't know if that's true, but it seemed like they're still going to have to be accountable the second day that they come back into the room, right?
Yeah, it's going to continue to take a partnership, Ruth. The accountability, the greatest accountability from my perspective is when it's in person between an adult and a child. So, if there's a student that doesn't complete the assignments during that asynchronous portion of the time, when the student would come back during the in-person time, then that would be the opportunity for accountability. The teacher having the ability to hold a student accountable for what they did or didn't do.
We've talked about that on and off for many years. That it's more of it's not just a teacher and student. It's a teacher, student, and family, mom and dad at home. And without all 3 legs of the chair, as it were, it's going to tip over. It's not going to work. So whether it's virtual, whether it's a hybrid, whether it's 5 days a week, if we don't have that parent component helping the child at home with the homework, with the studies, with whatever it is, whatever the assignment, the project is, we're just, it's going to be an uphill struggle for the teacher because she don't have that partnership or he doesn't have that partnership at home.
Another point that was brought up in one of the emails to me was that if we did bring the lower kids back, that might free up the time for the older kids who are currently at home helping them, helping their younger siblings or whoever is in charge with the younger siblings. It could be high school students, it could be middle, it'll free them up to be maybe concentrate a little bit more and get more into their own studies versus watching their little brothers or sisters. So I thought that was a good point.
Yep.
About moving too.
Yeah, yep. Potentially, that is a good point, Ruth. One of the things that we hear from our high school colleagues is that there are a number of students that are feeling compelled to go to work during the day during this full-time virtual instruction. We know that a lot of our high school students, they have to contribute to their families financially. And so, that's something I'm thankful for the wellness teams and attendance teams keeping an eye out on attendance to make sure that students are logging on and are staying engaged with virtual learning. We look at our attendance data, and the attendance data in phase 3, it's pretty similar to where it is normally. I'm happy to report the attendance data at the elementaries is a bit higher. We've got an overall district attendance average right now of 90.7. This is in the full virtual environment. The attendance rate at the elementaries is north of 94 for all buildings. The attendance rate at Ritenour High School is at 85% because teachers are keeping track of attendance every day. And the attendance at our middle schools is hovering around 85% as well. So my greatest concern is that our attendance numbers in phase 3 would just fall off the map. The data to this point has not indicated that that's happened. When we would return to phase 2, the students' attendance rate would be based on the days of their in-person attendance. And so if it's 2 days a week for in-person instruction, if a student misses a day, their attendance rate would be 50%. So put a real focus on communication if students are absent. But we're also standing behind the fact of we're not going to have any kind of attendance incentives for students or staff because if somebody is symptomatic, whether it be a student or a staff member, they need to stay away. They need to stay home where they can be well.
Right. Another thing that a teacher shared with me, I don't know if you've heard this, but there seems to be some difficulty in the system to report absenteeism. They try to report it and the system won't let them. I don't know if you heard that or not, but that's a problem right there.
There was a little bit of confusion. I did hear that because absences were being reported with a P. So, if a student is absent, they enter a P for pandemic. And so that was part of what got to me. There was some confusion around, how attendance is being tracked. If there's other concerns around that, I can check with the tech department and see if I'm off base, if there's something else that's going on that's making it a problem for teachers.
Okay.
Dr. Kilbride, one thing I know, like in the phase 2 plan that was presented, I didn't really see that much information on transportation. Can you share a little bit of insight about how that process is going to work for the transportation department?
Yes. Yeah. So the transportation routes would remain essentially the same. Kudos to the transportation department for considering a whole lot of options as to what that would need to look like. But based on the hybrid model, there would be one student in a seat at a time. That would be the social distancing. That would be the social distancing on the bus. Buses currently can transport up to 66 students, I believe. When we would move to one student per seat on the bus, that would allow us to transport up to 23 students on a bus, I believe. And that would be the social distancing that would be done. The routes would remain the same. We don't need to revise our routes. There was some conversation about temperature checks being done by bus drivers before the student would board the bus. We've talked to our colleagues in other districts, and we've gotten feedback around that when that's attempted, the routing and the timing and the arrival, it gets thrown off very much. And then also that idea of deliberate indifference. If a student, is somehow symptomatic, and then to, drive off and then struggle to communicate with the parent who may not know where their child is, that's a part of that concern as well. So bus drivers would not be taking temperatures of students, but rather when the students would arrive at school, in addition to families doing a symptom check, including temperature check before the student gets on the bus, the students would be given a temperature check by a Ritenour staff member before they would come in a building.
Are the students going to be assigned to a seat on the bus? So that way, when they get on the bus, they're in the same seat every day?
Seating assignments on the bus, as well as loading the bus in a specific order to try to prevent students from having to walk past one another. Face-to-face contact in social distancing is one of the names of the game. So it'd be not only, assigning seats, but also being purposeful as to how the buses get loaded. The other part to that, and to Lisa's question also was bus drivers would be provided with PPE, so they'd be wearing appropriate PPE on the bus at all times.
Are we gonna have to add any buses for that, or is just for clarification? Dwight says no. Okay, thank you.
So yeah. I've not been a part of that conversation. We went through a couple of different iterations, but we think we can do it with our current routes.
And when you say
And would this, as far as the buses go, would this impact the delivery of the meals to the other students who are not in school?
Dwight, do you care to speak on that?
Sure. No, what we plan on doing is still doing 2 morning runs. So we'd still do a middle school and a high school run delivering meals, and then do the elementary run to transport students. So it's just, the key is just to communicate that instead of 3 runs, which they would have available to do their pickup of meals, they would have 2 runs. And and that's how we would do that.
And our elementary students who choose RVA would be able to pick up either at the middle or the high school time route.
Correct. And then as we move further down the line into phase 1, we'll have a different way for RVA students to get meals at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Dwight, I'm sorry. I'm not understanding how this is working. Tell me again how the food is going to go.
So right now, we do all 3 runs, a middle school, a high school, and an elementary run with times that we would be at each bus stop. So families
Okay.
actually have 3 different times in the morning for them to pick up their meals. We don't restrict. If you're an elementary student, you can go at the middle school time if you're an early riser and you want to do that, or a parent wants to go and pick up 4 meals for their students that might be 2 elementary, a middle, and a high school. They can do that. So families have the choice of any one of those 3 runs to pick up their meals. Once we go into phase 2 for elementary, we won't be delivering meals during that elementary run, which is the 3rd tier of our day. We will be transporting students. So families will still have the opportunity to either during the middle school run or the high school run, when we're delivering meals, to pick up meals.
And they know what those times are?
They will.
Okay.
The communications department will do their normal fantastic job of communicating all of that.
Right.
And going back to the,
So then they'll go and pick up the kids afterwards, is what you're saying? The 3rd run will be picking up the kids.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
so going back to the question about the bus drivers having a PPE, what does that look like if a student does not have a mask prior to getting on the bus?
Well, we'll have masks on the bus also to give them if they don't have one,
Okay.
as well as we'll have extra masks at school to provide for students also. And I did also want to mention that the buses will be cleaned every day electrostatically.
Thank you.
Are those masks like child size masks so that they're not the huge ones for adults?
The mask that we received, it's a shipment from DESE, and they're Hanes masks. They're not different sizes. They're all one size. Best case scenario would have been we would have different sizes to perhaps better fit students, but they're all one size.
And those are just if someone doesn't have one. I know like a lot of kids already have masks, they've come out with all those cute little different kinds. I mean, even my little, 3-year-old grandson has a mask. So,
we've committed from the beginning that we would provide masks as necessary. If people don't have them, we would provide them, but we're encouraging people to use what they're comfortable with.
So Dr. Kilbride, the other thing when we talk about that, updating the phase 2 plan on the website, will there be information in there for the families as it pertains to the food restrictions, like if they'll have restrictions as it pertains to bringing food to school?
There's been an update on that. If Lisa, if you remember, the phase 2 plan was no food from home.
Right.
We've gotten feedback. We've gotten feedback from partner districts that already have students in person that the issue is not contamination from home, but rather it's the issue of when students need assistance with opening prepackaged items. So if it's an early learner that has prepackaged item, they attempt to open it themselves and then they can't, so then they ask for staff assistance. And so that's a change that we've made where now food service would be revising menus to reduce the amount of prepackaged items that would be sent. And then also, we've revised the plan so that students in grades 3 through 5 would have no issue with students bringing food from home because the feedback is that students at those grade levels, generally, there are very few issues of opening prepackaged food if they bring it from home. It's really at the kindergarten to second grade level where students are reporting they need a whole lot of help from staff. And then staff, rightfully so, are pretty reticent about stepping in and doing that. That's the kind of information that would be updated to staff members on Friday, and then our communications department would push that message out to the community along with if we make an announcement of a move to phase 2.
Gotcha. But like if I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just making certain that if there's a dietary allergy or restriction, that they are an exception part of that, just in case.
And that's, yeah, so Stacy, going back to the first conversation, like we would have the standard, but then if there is a need for an accommodation, that would be something that would need to work through the nurse, work through the school staff, so that, we have control and we have standards, but we also have purposeful accommodation as it's needed. And so if there's a dietary need there, just as long as people know about it, the family knows about it, the school knows about it, so everybody's on the same page.
And are we talking about just lunch at school now? Because if you're handing the food out in the morning, the kids will probably eat it before they even come to school, correct?
So in the plan, there's breakfast and lunch, and in the plan, it is that students would eat breakfast and lunch in the classroom as possible, but in the cafeteria with social distancing practices. Like there's a loose tight between the district and the building, which will generally be driven by class size. So if in the building, the decision is made to have students eat lunch in the cafeteria as opposed to in the classroom, then the social distancing team has already been through every one of the cafeterias, and they've put colored dots on the tables, red, green, yellow, and blue, I believe, that indicates where a student could sit, and it's all 6 feet apart. So that's creating, I know, some questions from staff saying, well, there's more questions that would remain. We want to allow a little bit of flexibility at the building level as to whether or not students would be eating in the classroom or in the cafeteria. Just allow a little bit of flexibility for buildings to make decisions around that.
And when are we telling buildings that they have to have their decisions made so that way our staff can get that information and feel comfortable with it?
Decisions about where children would eat.
Whatever decisions that the buildings need to put into place.
Yeah, so we're meeting with principals. We met with them this afternoon. We're meeting with them on Tuesday afternoons and also Thursday afternoons. So it's twice a week, and we've been, following that routine for a bit of time now. So we haven't set, a hard deadline for principals in terms of like that specific decision. We just try to create where the decisions that can be made by the buildings, where those can be made. But in terms of, putting out a deadline that by the 29th of September, buildings need to have that, confirmed. We haven't put that out there yet. And perhaps that might be where some of the concern might be coming from some buildings.
Yeah, it'd be nice if it was like put together in a kind of like a building plan, how we're putting in a school district plan. If they had a building plan that they could share to their staff, and then that would help them feel comfortable that they're, or if they have additional questions that maybe that committee didn't think of in that building, they could get it added to it. And that would help with some of the unknowns, like where am I eating lunch? Where are my kids eating lunch?
Yeah, I think it would be good to get feedback from your teachers. I mean,
Right.
they're the ones, they not just leave it up to the principals to decide. I think it's
Right.
always good to get feedback from everybody involved. At least ask for it. They may not all want to give something, but at least ask for it.
Madam President, are you ready for a motion?
Not quite. So I do have one. I have another question on the specialists that we have. So, we have our PE, art, and music that Ruth brought up. What about our other specialists? How is, like, say we have a reading specialist or something, and they come in and get 6 kids or whatever. How is that going to look? I just wanted to ask, because that seemed to also be another question that was coming to us.
Yeah, the focus has been on reducing the number of in-person students that teachers would be interacting with. We've been able to, devise a specialist schedule that we believe accomplishes that. One of the things that makes it dynamic with interventionists is, assessments were still being administered to students to determine who are receiving tiered interventions. So interventionists, I believe, are just now still getting their caseloads completely set. Like, they know the students that are carrying over from the past year that they have to serve, but thankful for the work that they're doing, as well as other staff members at the early childhood level, as well as the kindergarten level, because they've been pushing into a lot of buildings and administering some reading assessments to help identify students that need those additional supports. So, the focus is on reducing the number of students that they would be interacting with in person at one time. The interventionist schedule, like where that will fit in during the day, it's going to be a little bit dynamic, because it's also dependent on if a student opts for the Ritenour Virtual Academy or if they opt for the in-person. So where, like, the lack of comfort, I think, is coming in from is we can't give a clear answer, because we don't know which direction the family would choose to go, because it would be a different schedule if there's a student that receives a tier 3 that's in Ritenour Virtual Academy versus the in-person time. So there are some questions around that, like what time during the day would I be pulling kids? It's not completely known yet, because we're waiting to see the full enrollment.
But the consideration is that you would have less interacting at one time than normal.
Yeah, that's been the focus. That's been the focus with the specialists. That's been the feedback from the interventionists. But in terms of what that would look like, it's not completely clear. As we look to other districts and how that's being accomplished, a lot of districts are keeping their consistent schedule as it was before. Where there are districts that have, the option of full virtual, the only other option being 5 days in person. Specialists are teaching the students that they receive, and they are coming into contact with more students than a classroom teacher, perhaps. I think what's taking some time for us is we're hearing that concern and that feedback, and we're trying to be responsive to it and coming up with these ways to limit the interaction. So it would not be apples to apples, a specialist compared to a grade level teacher, but it would be much reduced compared to if the specialist was seeing their regular slate of students.
So if a teacher is not there, because I know this was brought up in several of the different emails, if they get COVID, or if they get COVID, or they have the symptoms, or
They're quarantined.
yeah, they're quarantined, or they decide to take FMLA. The concern seems to be what's going to happen with my students, because I'm not going to be there.
So we first, board members worked some months back to build out our sub pool above and beyond what we had. If you remember, we raised the sub pay not only for substitute teachers, but we've also raised the sub pay for retired Ritenour educators, with the goal that we would like to attract our retired Ritenour educators to serve as subs in the district. There was feedback that we received that it's a potential that members of our sub pool would be in high risk categories and wouldn't be available to sub. That could happen, and there are certainly teachers that are in our sub pool that are in high risk categories and would not come for in-person instruction. So the backup is we've created a prioritized list of staff members who would be required to step up and sub in grade level classes as necessary. That list does include specialists. That list does include administrators. It includes assistant principals, and it also includes central office staff. Very much the idea that if there is not coverage, it's got to be all hands on deck with adults to be prepared to step up and sub. We hear from time to time that there are some staff members that would be considering taking FMLA, whether it be for childcare or whether it be for fear of the virus. Staff members have that right. That would create a bit of a pool on the substitute pool, and we just have to be prepared to work through that.
Do we have any kind of feedback from other districts that are open that they're having the problem with that?
So the feedback that we've received from some districts is that there are some staff members that have chosen to take emergency FMLA, and they've just done some of the similar strategies that we've done. They've tried to increase the number of staff subs available in their pool, and they've also, outlined who else would need to be prepared to step into sub. I think the other districts have also shared that the anticipation of the first day is worse than the first day itself. That was another bit of feedback that we received from some other places.
One
Thank
last
you.
question I have. Well, I have two last questions. One is the RVA date when you were going to open that back up. Can you remind me again what that date was?
So pending board action, RVA date would be open tomorrow.
Okay.
It would be open tomorrow. It'd be open for a period of 3 days. And the rationale for the short window, board members, is that we get the response rates now for surveys and district communication is astounding. And I believe in 3 days, those families that would want to opt for full virtual, they would do it in those 3 days. We would have to keep the Ritenour virtual window option for newly enrolling families because, we want to make sure that, if you don't enroll in Ritenour until the 1st of October, we would want you to have the same opportunity to access the virtual option that people that enrolled back in July had. So we would have a 3-day window to try to onboard the next large chunk of Virtual Academy students, but then we would need to keep it open for new enrollees throughout the course of the year. And another reason for the short window is the final rosters for in-person in buildings. They're dependent on pulling those virtual students off so that buildings can get accurate rosters for teachers.
And with that, if people have questions in regards to, do you think this would be a good option for my student? Do you think this is the right choice for us? Or any kind of question they have about RVA, who would they contact in order to get those answers?
A lot of that communication is coming through the district website. There's information out there on the Ritenour Virtual Academy. We have a team that's working with RVA that includes Shanae McCoy, that includes Deneen Stewart, also includes Bob Dillon and Dorlita Adams. And so that, the questions around RVA could be answered by that team that are above and beyond the website.
And I'd also suggest that if they really wanted to know if they felt like their child is a candidate for that, they should probably reach out to their teacher too, to see what the teacher feels, because not everybody may know who their child is or their abilities, and if that's the right choice for them.
Right.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions?
I have no questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. But when we take this vote,
Penny, we can't hear you.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
We
Penny.
can't hear you, Penny.
Are we voting on sending our? Oh. All right. I don't know. Let's turn my volume up. I don't know.
You're kind of cutting in and out, like your connection's not
Okay,
well.
does that sound better? I've got my volume all the way up.
It's not your volume, it's your
Can you hear
connection.
me?
Hey, Penny, can you
It's your con-
consider writing Jennifer in chat and maybe she can read it for you?
Why don't we put the motion up and you can see what it says?
All right.
Is that what her question is?
Yes. What are we going to be approving tonight?
Says my connection is strong.
Doug, can you put the motion up?
Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then I'll type a question. Yeah. What? Okay.
Doug, can you put the motion up?
Can everybody hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Because first off, I want to commend everybody for doing all this hard work and trying to get this completed and understood and clear and transparent for everybody. Because I can only imagine the amount of hours that it has taken to get to this point to truly see what's going on with the recommendations. And so I am very impressed with that. Dr. Kilbride, I just want to make sure that there is a component for the mental and emotional support of both staff and students during this process for everybody.
Yeah, we know that emotions are high. We know that fear is high during this time. And so whether it be through the EAP program, whether it be through the wellness teams, I'm also happy to report that the teams that ran the conversations about race in a safe space, they've started conversations again about, some organized dialogues. So look forward to learning more about that to see if that could be a piece of the puzzle as well.
So just for clarification, if I'm understanding you correctly, maybe some of the details that from questions that we've asked tonight, or even just the information initially shared in this phase 2 document, the minutia details maybe have not been shared at the building levels with the frontline staff. Is that accurate?
That's correct. Based on the new information and the way that things are dynamic, some of the minute details have not been shared with teachers, with support staff at this point. They are being shared and finalized with principals, the minute details, and we'd be sharing them later this week. The plan is to have those details confirmed on Thursday. The specifics around assignment of staff to specific entrances in the building, the minute details around the face coverings and details that are not in the plan, those would be pushed out this week, which I think is also contributing to some of the fear and the concern and the reports of additional questions. My hope is that when we push out this information to all staff, that it would answer a lot of the concerns that are out there.
And one other thing that I just want to say is that even if we go through, when we go through and if we approve this evening, if anything comes around and the numbers in the area start to spike up and we start to have a major breakout at the school district, everything will be reviewed again, correct?
So the goal of the return to learning plan is it has to be fluid amongst the 3 phases. So if there's spikes at the elementary level, there would be the potential to revisit this, and potentially we would have to go back to a phase 3. Teachers have been working hard. They've done a whole lot of learning around virtual. We're getting feedback that, to some extent, this all of this learning has been for naught. Really, it's going to be extremely valuable on Fridays. And then if ever, not just a whole group of buildings or the whole district would go back to phase 3, but if an individual building would need to go to phase 3 for, based on data, we'd have to be prepared to do that too. So all the learning that Ritenour teachers have done about how to implement virtual, it's going to be critical because we're going to be with virtual for some time.
We just need our families to be aware that that is a possibility.
Right.
It sounds like
yeah.
with everything else we do that's new and different, that communication, effective communication, continual communication is going to be the key to making this work more than data and meetings and everything else. The more we can put in people's hands as far as information, the more we can give teachers and get teachers involved in making the decisions and getting the information. That will make or break this period. And if we don't let everybody know, everybody that doesn't know will assume the worst. What's going on? How come I don't know? What's going on? How come they haven't told us? And with that, we need to make sure that when we think they should all have heard this and read this, to put it out there one more time. To let everybody know one more time. Put out another email blast. Put out another phone call. Put out another document, papers, flyer that goes home with the kids. Make sure that everybody knows. And, emails are easy to delete, but they're sure not easy to read when you don't get them.
And then I'd like to say Penny sent me her message, and her question was, are the high school and middle school remaining virtual through the quarter or semester?
We don't have a set date. Like, we haven't locked in for a quarter. We haven't locked in for a semester. Much like I believe that a lot of districts are doing, they're just monitoring data on a regular basis. We're staying in contact with the county executive and the Department of Health. I just, part of locking in for a specific time, like a quarter or a semester, I think it's somewhat arbitrary. So if it's, you lock in for a quarter and the data indicates it's just not right, well, does that send a message to parents that we're expecting us to go back at quarter? Does that send some kind of message to parents? Versus the approach that we've taken, which is, we're just going to monitor data on an ongoing basis. And as data indicates that we can move, we'll take that opportunity. I just want to reinforce that right now, the data is just not there at the middle school and high school level. And that's why we would not be making the recommendation to move at this point. I do think that when we get to a point to move to phase 2 at the middle and high, or the middle or high, that people are so good at coming up with questions that we also need them to clarify our thinking. That's where the elementary teachers have been invaluable as they're, working long hours with virtual instruction. They're also asking us some great questions that cause us to revise our plan.
Does anybody have any other questions, concerns, comments?
I have a comment that I just want to let everyone know that the good thing about these Zoom meetings have been that we are on YouTube And so I think from what I hear from the community and from parents, they have a better opportunity of tuning in and seeing what we're discussing versus when we previously did not do the YouTube. And I believe that once we go back into the our regular meeting place, which is the admin center, that we will continue to do YouTube. And I just really hope that parents will continue to, dial in and watch along with our staff, because I think it's important that everyone knows about these discussions that we're having. Feedback is just so important.
Dr. Kilbride, I believe we purchased the correct elements needed so that we can continue to do this going forward forever, right?
Yeah, board members, based on your feedback, the Community Services Department has purchased the appropriate camera that would allow us to live stream these meetings on YouTube when we're back in person. So when the board does make the decision to come back in person, we'd be able to do these meetings on YouTube.
Very good.
I just chime in on that. Because a lot of times we have our first 2 Thursdays, and I can honestly say that, with the increased demand of having to make these meetings, and when I'm working as hard as I am and as late as I am, because I literally was taking my PPE off as I was getting ready for this meeting, it allows me, a working mom, the ability to be able to get into these meetings, not be late. And I know that this is Zoom, and I do appreciate the in-person, and I can do both. The thing is, I want people to keep in mind that this is a very convenient situation for somebody who's working really hard, especially being an independent business within Overland, that, yeah, I want to be in person as much as anybody else. I could be up there at that building, but what's nice with these extra meetings that we have to do with time restraints, being a parent, having a child in school, this is very convenient also for that working mom to be like, yes, I can be here, I'm on time, and we can listen, collaborate, and we can also do a lot of information and not waste time doing very important decisions.
Right.
Anything else? If there's no other questions, this is a time when I would look for recommendations, and then I will call votes.
So
I move
moved.
that we initiate phase 2 of the return to learning plan at the elementary level, starting with kindergarten on October 7th, grades 1 through 3 on October 12th, and grades 4 and 5 on October 19th. Initiate phase 1 of the
Nope.
return.
There are 2 different recommendations.
Ah,
Sorry.
are they?
Yes, sorry.
All right, there. That's the first one.
I have a question before we go with that. Do we need to say updated phase 2 plan?
So, the phase 2 plan, or the plan is outlined, and phase 2 is defined as the choice of hybrid, in person, and the choice of virtual. So that's the phase 2 component. There are some additional details that are being modified. So if the board would wish to see that as amended, based on the feedback from principals that we'd be finalizing on Thursday night, that could be forwarded to the board as well.
So we don't need to say updated, we just leave it as is what you're saying?
Phase 2 is hybrid in person or the choice of virtual. Phase 1 is full in person.
Okay.
Did somebody second that? Stacy?
Yeah, I second.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll call the vote. Dr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Would it be possible to come back to me?
Yes, sir. Mr. Garden? Mr. Garden? She put pass. Dr. Albin?
Yes.
Ms. Greco?
Yeah, before I make my vote, I would just like to say a couple things. I heard from a lot of people that they wanted us to use data. I think we did do that in coming up with this idea of moving into phase 2. Safety for all is always foremost in our minds, and I believe that the district has come up with a plan that will hopefully make safety for all. We won't know until we get there. But like everything, we have to be flexible. If things change, we have to be able to move with the changes. And we also, this is a partnership. It's not just a partnership with the board or with the staff or with the parents or the students. It's with everybody. And we have to have feedback from everybody. And I received a lot of feedback. I received over 30 emails from staff. Some of them were in favor of going back into the classroom, and a lot of them had good ideas and thoughts, and I appreciate that. And I really appreciate parental feedback, because we need to see that and hear that in order to know if we're doing what we need to do to make your child successful. So we need to hear from everybody, and whether you're for it or against it, we still need to know what your thoughts are. And so all those things taken into consideration and weighing everything that was given to me and what my discussions with Chris and was presented tonight, I vote yes to go into phase 2.
Thank you, Ms. Greco. Ms. Glover Jones?
So for just a couple comments. For me, I do appreciate the efforts that have went into play as we go back into phase 2. I think that it is evident that our staff and our families are very passionate and about this move, as well as the work that we've done thus far as it pertains to virtual. I do have some concerns in regards to how we are getting and sharing this detailed information with our staff, meaning our teachers, if they're the frontline individuals. I think we had a lesson learned as it pertains to virtual in getting feedback from our staff and letting them be aware about what are the details and the expectations for them, versus it being, okay, well, it's going to trickle down after we as a board make a vote. I myself even had to reach out to get more detailed information to help me feel more prepared for tonight, so I could understand how staff may be having some reservation and anxiety as it pertains to something of this nature, just because of not having particular information and maybe not feeling like we're being as transparent as we can be. With that being said, I'm perfectly okay with certain components of this plan, but I'm not comfortable with the 4th and 5th graders that soon, so I have to say no.
Back to Mr. Lewis.
Yeah, I'm still, I mean, I appreciate, as other board members have said, I appreciate all the work that has went into this. And I appreciate the data that was shared. However, I'm still very apprehensive because of what's being reported, news outlets and other media that's kind of contradicting. So I'm just still having a hard time with comfortably saying yes. With this, I just still feel I understand the struggles that families are having with the virtual learning, but I've been struggling with this all day, and I'm still not feeling any better than I did earlier today with my concern with, I understand the group will not be infected by the COVID, but I'm still looking for data as far as if they're asymptomatic or if they're not tested, then how do we know that they're not spreading it? So that's my concern right now. So I really have to go with my heart and how I was feeling throughout the day, and I'm going to have to vote no on this one.
Hey,
Mr.
Jennifer,
Yes.
I'd like to say a little bit, because I didn't get a chance to say a little bit what kind of swayed me to where I am. My thing has to do with, we have to educate the whole student, not about just curriculum, social and emotional needs, especially K through 2. And I have touched base with many of these children that are within my community and as well as patients of mine, and they are having a really tough go about not being within the classroom and having a teacher. And I understand all of the challenges that are going on, but when you have a kindergarten and they don't even know how to be in a classroom, it's not just about the knowledge of writing the letter A. It's about being in a classroom with a teacher, and is so vital and important. And I really, if anything now, I hold my educators in such higher esteem than I ever did before, because I understand, I get it. And so if, to me, it's really about that social emotional aspect, because this is the window that's this big for these guys. You got kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade. This is important. And so if you're thinking about the fact that you only have this small group, starting off very small, trying to maintain safe, keeping that transparency, which I think is absolutely important, which means having that communication out there, making sure that our website is right spot on. It's the movement, because we are here to educate our kids, and it's not just about 1, 2, 3, ABC. It's about being people, and it's about making sure that we have our educators truly in connection with these small little bitty kiddos. And so that's kind of what swayed me to make the decision that I made.
And Stacy, for me, I've looked at all of that, and I thought about that component. But the thing that I'm still not so comfortable with is, even with them being back in the classroom and having to take all of the social distance protective measures, will they still be able to get what they need from a social and emotional standpoint, like they should have? Because we're still going to have to take procedures, and still not going to be a lot of interaction with the students. So that's really, to me, that's still kind of helping me to lean to where I am, because I'm still not certain that that's going to be fulfilling to them, with all of the safety measures and procedures that have to be put in place. So.
Oh,
Orlando.
no, and
Yeah.
I totally understand that. It's just that they've already had to adapt and change within society already, and to try to think about the idealized of what was before. I think it's so important for children to be together. I think it's so important for a teacher, or even if it's an SSD teacher, to be able to be there, because a lot of it has to do with that interaction, and with a smaller classroom size, keeping people safe, wearing a mask, washing your hands. Because unfortunately, I don't know that this is going to be solved by November. It may not be solved from this year or until next year. It's just having a kid in front of a screen, and if they don't get that interaction, that's part of the education. It's not just learning your critical aspects. And to me, just seeing the children within my community and on my street, and knowing that little bit of aspect, I wish it was perfect. I wish it was an idealized world where we had a vaccine. But unfortunately, they are having to deal with wearing masks in today's world. And it's just like, we within this community, who are the taxpayers with my business, and it's like, I have my patients, they depend upon me, and I cannot do anything on teledentistry. I have to see patients. So what can I put in place to be able to ensure that I am providing the dentistry and the safety for my patients that I have? It's like, when you're one-on-one like with that with other people, it's like you have to really be fluid about your safety. And I've been tested 3 times and I'm negative, but trying to create that safe environment, it's difficult. It's a hard decision. It's about being brave and courageous, and there's nothing easy about it. But it's like, when we're talking about our K through 2, those are like the nitty gritty, and we can't give it back to them, but we can certainly make our best effort. And unfortunately, the screen is just not quite enough. They need just a little bit more. And what's great about kids in that age group is they're so adaptable. And so I wish we could make it idealized. But right now, it's like, I just want to give them that little bit more, because it's so important for them. Because it's like, whew, before you know it, it's gone.
So,
Orlando.
question, go ahead.
Orlando, I was just gonna say, I have 2 grandchildren in a preschool and they're totally safe and doing well. And it is so important that they have that interaction with children. And then I also received feedback from one of the parents who keeps children in her house, you know, daycare more or less. But they're in school, they're virtual learners. And she said just the difference, the growth that she's seen from when she started taking them in at the end of August, you know, at August to where they are now, that they're so much happier. They can, you know, be with each other and there's no problems there. So, you know, that reassures me also.
Yeah, and I have to admit that I until we got the memo, I thought we were voting on maybe K through first grade. So I was all set for that, but for those reasons. But I guess by voting yes, we're voting on the whole, you know, so.
Understand.
Yeah.
Mr. Garden, can you hear us? So, Dr. Kilbride, Penny has stated that she voted no if it was a different age group that would be considered. So, I would like to actually ask Ms. Clover Jones, you had made this statement even about if it didn't have 4th or 5th grade in it. Can you give me a little feedback on why you had stated that?
Yes, so the concern is just doing the process so quickly for our 4th and 5th graders as it pertains to this plan. Is like a back to back to back. And I think there's opportunity for us to learn and navigating with our smaller kids. We know as with the older kids, the process should get typically easier. Whereas I feel like that there may be, and I could be completely wrong, but there may be opportunity for our 4th and 5th graders where they kind of have gotten in more of a groove as it pertains to the virtual learning. And so to transition at that point in time, I think will impact, as well as some of the data doesn't necessarily support that age range also being in person. So that's one of the reasons for me, 4th and 5th graders. I'm a little bit hesitant. I get it, most definitely. I wholeheartedly agree with the K through 3 even, but for the 4th and 5th graders, I feel like there's a sense of independence among them, but I could be wrong.
Dr. Kilbert, I'd like to ask you, we seem to have a split here. And
Did we finish the vote?
I did not
Yeah,
vote.
so
I'm asking a
yeah.
question. Go ahead.
Mhm. Oh, yeah. So in this situation with, you know, the vote has been called and seconded and, you know, we're in an open forum and Penny was having some communication issues. So she voted virtually, which was a no. So we would need to finish out this vote and vote on the motion, which was to approve the phase 2-1 plan as read. And so it would be dependent, Jennifer, on you, you know, finishing and voting on this motion.
So I'm sorry. Penny asked me to finish her whole statement. I'm sorry. Let me read that and then I will read mine. With all things considered, including input from teachers and parents, I feel that it is not the best interest of our whole community to return to school buildings at this time. I vote no. If it were just K through 2, I would reconsider.
I have a question for Lisa. How much time do you think the 4th and 5th graders would need to prepare for that? Are you saying they would never come back?
No, I'm not saying nobody would never come back. So I'm just saying in the essence of looking at that particular schedule that was outlined. That's what I'm talking about, because it goes back to back with the grade levels.
Because wouldn't they get 5 weeks to prepare for that?
So I'm talking about from a student perspective, not from a teacher's perspective. I'm confident the teachers would be, I'm talking about from a student perspective. Yeah. I would hope our 4th and 5th grade teachers will be prepared by then.
Yeah, I'm sure they would.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
So with that, I am going to vote no on that recommendation. However, if anybody would like to offer a different recommendation, we could revote.
So board members, if a board member chooses to make a recommendation, then the board could choose to act. The board has voted down the recommendation for the return to phase 2 and phase 1. We could come back to our meeting next week or even the October work session, address some of the concerns that have been highlighted in this conversation tonight, and come back with a recommendation that meets more of your needs.
Well, I can make the motion to recommend everything as was, except for the 4th and 5th. The motion's gone, so I can't see it. Okay.
There it is.
All right, recommend to initiate phase 2 of the return to learning plan at the elementary level, starting with kindergarten on October 7th, grades 1 through 3 on October 12th.
I second.
I have a motion and a second for that recommendation. Any other questions? I'll call the vote. Dr. Thomas,
I'm gonna pass. I want to see what everybody else does.
Mr. Lewis,
I vote yes on that one.
Mr. Garden. Mr. Garden, pass. Dr. Albin,
Yes.
Ms. Greco,
Yes.
Ms. Glover Jones,
Yes.
Dr. Thomas,
In this, when we have a lengthy discussion like this, and then there were some very good questions asked, and there's some very good information passed along. It seems like a lot of times we don't want to take the leap of faith forward with our administration and our superintendent. I fully believe, after talking with him for several days on end, asking him questions and finding out information, that we are ready to move forward with our process. I get people don't have the comfort level needed to do what we vote on and how we vote and everything, but I think it shows that our administration is ready and they have a plan. They might not have all the T's dotted and I's crossed, but it's there. And as they move forward and have kids into the building, things will evolve, things will change as plans do. And I think having faith in what they can do is part of this. I would be happy voting with the 4th and 5th grade, though that wasn't part of this motion. I will vote in the affirmative on this and wait for us to move forward with the next reiteration of this.
thank you, Dr. Thomas. Mr. Garden, her vote is yes. And I will vote yes. We do have one other motion. It is to move to phase 1 for the Early Childhood Center. I'm just looking for the recommendation.
So moved.
Second,
I have a motion and a second for that. I will call the vote. Dr. Thomas,
yes.
Mr. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Garden. She votes yes. Dr. Albin,
Yes.
Ms. Greco,
Yes.
Ms. Glover Jones,
Yes.
and I will vote yes. I want to
Moving-
thank, wait, before we go.
Yeah,
I
just
want to thank everybody for coming and having the discussions and asking the questions and helping to work through this. I do want to task Dr. Kilbride with what we need to do to look at the next steps to get the 4th and 5th graders moved into that. So if you, the board, if you have any questions, concerns, thoughts, I suggest that you reach out to Dr. Kilbride and get those questions out there. And then Dr. Kilbride, if you can make sure to share those with everybody so that way we can kind of see the other questions. I love this discussion, you know, but we have to end it sometime. And I would say that we just keep moving forward and we'll look at the 4th and 5th graders soon. I don't want to put it off too long, but we, you know, we need to kind of see how things are going and then move on to that next step.
You know,
Well,
I would-
how long do we go before we see how things are going?
Well, I would hope that we're getting feedback like immediately. Like even from what I've heard, it seems like this plan is now going to be more detailed. It's going to be shared out to the staff. So getting feedback immediately, I think is going to be important. And I think we have to be vigilant. I think you said it yourself, Brad, about communication.
Absolutely.
That communication coming back to us so we can be on top of what the experience is like and that feedback from our families and our teachers. So I don't know if there's some type of weekly platform. I know we have memos that kind of go back and forth, but it should be a specific dashboard that we're also looking at too as it pertains to this type of information.
Yes.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to say was thank you to our parents and families for
Yeah.
the virtual support they are providing. And to please to remind you all that if you need any kind of help and you're not successful, we want the feedback, but also there are steps you can take, you know, let your teacher know, let the administration know in your building, talk to other parents because, you know, it's always better if you work with somebody than try to do it all on your own. So I just wanted to thank them for their support.
Thanks for sharing
And I'd
that.
like to say as well in closing the same, I'd like to echo Ruth. And also just to share that my concern was not with not having confidence in our administrative staff. I have all the confidence in the world that our administrative staff is doing and will do all that they can to provide for our children socially, emotionally, educationally, you know, the whole child. But I'm also one that's more concerned with what's out of our administrative hands. And that's the, you know, the contact and the infectious rate of the COVID. That's something they cannot control. So I just want to share that with the administrative staff to let them know that it was not anything regarding them, but someone that has had the COVID personally. I'm very passionate about the seriousness of it. So.
Thank you.
Move to adjourn.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second. I'll call the vote.
Yes.
Dr. Thomas, Mr. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Garden. She says yes. Dr. Albin,
Yes.
Ms. Greco,
Yes.
Ms. Clever Jones,
Yes.
and I will vote yes. Thank you again, everybody, for coming and having the conversation together. We do not have an easy job, but we'll get through it.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you,
That's
everybody.
why we get paid the
Thank
big
you, everybody.